Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Vacation Rental Blueprint, the podcast where we provide valuable insights and strategies for vacation rental owners. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing a topic that may sound counterintuitive. It's why a challenged economy can actually be the best thing for your vacation rental. But before we jump in, I'm your host, Tim, and joining me as always, my co-host, TC. TC, hello. How are you?
Hello. Doing great. I'm anxious to hear what we talk about today because this is meaningful to all of us.
All of us, because I think this is a core foundation to business building. I think there's a lot going on that's driving this discussion, including the economy. I think we're on the heels recording today of the Fed not taking an interest rate hike for the first time in 10 plus months.
Yep, didn't take one, and the market responded favorably. But then he came out later on, Jay Powell, and talked about, doesn't mean we stop, probably going to take some more hikes in the future. And then, of course, the market cooled down a bit. This is the most reactive I've ever seen the market, as far as usually when you see a price of a stock, all the news is built in. But lately, every new piece of data that comes out, the market is spiking, dropping. It's just a volatile market right now.
It's an interesting time to be navigating the economy. And I think that's, I think we're also two consecutive weeks. We're on the second consecutive week of some drops in general mortgage rates. So, I think it's always moving, it's always changing, as it always is, but definitely seems to be more volatile right now. And I think that's why, our episode today is, so important for all of our listeners to understand. And thanks to everyone for the amazing feedback and conversations I've had with you all over the last week since our episode on Airbnb Bust. I think that was a great episode, and I think it elicited a lot of conversations because you definitely, in this industry, you read a lot of good and you read a lot of bad, and there's always going to be those back and forth. So great feedback, and thanks for everyone. Keep the messages coming. Keep the well wishes coming. We definitely love recording these episodes. But yeah, I think when we look at today and with this economy that's just up and down, TC, I think a lot of people it elicits that fear or a bit of a cause for concern, right? Just okay, I don't know what's happening with the economy. Maybe I'm not great at understanding what's going on in the economy. When I hear that Powell didn't take an interest rate hike, generally I understand, cool, good, finally. But, beyond that, there's quite a few people I talk to that don't really understand how it directly impacts, if at all, their business. They just, I think, are being trained to think it's either good or bad for their business.
Well, I think that's right. I think what one word of caution we can offer, and again, we are not financial advisors, so this is just our approach. But, when we think about all the news you hear, I think we all have to be trained to think of it with a degree of skepticism and think for ourselves. So I don't want to let someone else tell me that the economy should cause me to do something. I want to think for myself. And, the economy is ever changing. I've heard so many people recently say, gosh, there's so much uncertainty, I'm not going to buy a stock, or I'm not going to buy a house right now until the uncertainty goes away. You're going to be waiting a long, long time. I think pausing and waiting, from my perspective, is never the right approach. It's have a good approach, a good investment approach yourself. Be thoughtful, but don't pause. There's deals that are to be made in every type of economy, as long as you train yourself and educate yourself to think critically.
Yeah, and it's a mindset too, right? I mean, Buffett, I think, has talked at length about this, but when the market's contracting, the general tendency is to play defense. The general tendency is to say, okay, the market is tightening, the market's contracting, things are getting challenging. I gotta suck it in. I gotta play a lot of defense here. But there's also that mindset. Okay, when everyone else is playing that defense, now it's my time to jump in and play some offense. And I think that's the crux of what we're going to be talking about a little essentially today is these we may be in a volatile economic environment. We may be in a struggling economy. But at the end of the day, the right mindset and approach to your business is going to allow you to play offense and take on some new strategies or implement some new strategies to help your business continue to grow even through these challenging economic times. Because as short-term rental owners, I'm fairly confident that no one is running a publicly traded short-term rental business. So the stock market volatility is one thing, but you are still running a business that is sort of satisfying a need in the market that is going to be there. And I think I pretty confidently say, it's going to, the demand for people to travel post-COVID and the desire for people to travel post-COVID is high. It's very high, and people want to get out and they want to look for great experiences. So, when I think about, okay, we're in an economy that I read about and hear about every day that is stressful, but I can still win in this environment.
That's right. And I think, the first tip we might offer is, you hear all the news, don't panic, step back, calm yourself, inform yourself, get educated. But remember, if you go back to a previous episode, set your objectives, set your strategy, set your tactics. When the external environment changes, your tactics might have to change, but your objectives probably don't. And maybe your strategies change a little bit, but if you think through your objectives and your strategies, then really what you're doing is you're modifying your tactics to meet the economy as it ebbs and flows. And it's always going to be ebbing and flowing. Once we get into a boom economy, you're going to want to change your tactics again. So always be in the mindset of inform yourself, be aware what's going on in the external environment, and then modify your tactics accordingly so that you can still reach your objectives. And for those listeners that were considering buying a short-term rental, this isn't the time to say, I'm just going to hold on my cash. Now, I will tell you this, there may not be as many viable deals for you, but there are still deals to be made as long as you have a good financial model and you buy using that financial model. We talk about this all the time, Tim, that if you buy a short-term rental today and the financial model works at a 6.5% interest rate, well, when interest rates drop and you're able to refinance, it's going to work even better. So just be diligent. Run your financial model. If it works, do the deal. But don't just go into the corner and panic and put your head in the sand because someone told you the economy is so volatile you should just hoard cash.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming consensus in what I read of, home prices have never been higher, interest rates through the roof, and then you talk to some real estate professionals that have been doing this for a very long time, and they're like, have you ever heard of an 18% interest rate? Because I've seen them.
I've lived through it.
Yeah, and so they're higher than they have been, and will we ever return to a period where 2.5% to 3% interest is prevalent? I'm kind of torn on that. Barring a global pandemic, I don't think so, but who knows?
And it's relative, right? I mean, if you lived through the late 70s and you were paying 18%, 6% seems still incredibly cheap. So it's all a matter of perspective. For those of us that only knew the 3% interest rate, seems high right now, but interest rates rise, interest rates fall. Run your financial model. If the deal works at 6%, it's going to work even better when you refinance when rates drop. You've always got the flexibility. So be thoughtful, run your model. I think that's the overarching tone of today.
And I've heard the counter before. The counter is, well, yeah, they had an 18% interest rate, but the home cost $109,000. And okay, that's fair. But it's also a reminder that in these types of markets, you have to go in if you've done your numbers, if you have your foundation and your business is set up to start to negotiate on some homes, go in with the intent to negotiate. It's not a non-negotiable sticker price, the listing price. And that's the piece where, as the market continues to change and adapt to different dynamics, go in with the understanding that I know my price point. I know, if I'm gonna mortgage this, I know, what I'm pre-approved for. I know where my entry point is, and I'm going to look for homes around that price point. But I'm ready to negotiate. I'm ready to work with a professional that knows how to negotiate, because you're going to find some properties that, yeah, your list is here, but if you go in and try to get in at a lower price that you can make work on your pro forma, okay, they say no, or they say yes because they need to exit. I think that's being open to that understanding, and having that understanding really develop through the knowledge that you've put on the front end of developing your business model is essential.
I think that's exactly right. And, for those that, own the short-term rental already, and you're facing and dealing with the economy as it is today, there are things that you can do. And again, we put that in the category of the tactics. So how do you modify, or what are some tactics that you can be thinking about to better position your short-term rental today, given the market conditions, so that you can still reach the objectives that you set out when you sat down and thoughtfully prepared your objective strategies and tactics? So what are some of those tactics, Tim, that our listeners can be thinking about today that are very responsive and very thoughtful in light of the economy as we see it and are experiencing it today?
I mean, I think, and I mentioned at the front, first it's embrace your mentality, embrace, what could be a challenged economy, and understand that you have a huge opportunity here to attract new guests and maximize your booking. I think once you get that mindset right, and then from there, make sure you understand your business model. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I talked to far too many short-term rental owners, and hopefully we're moving the needle on this. But yeah, maybe they did a pro forma. Maybe they put together their business model, and they got it created. They acquired their first property, and they never looked at it again. Right? I mean, that's the challenge of making sure you understand and are up to date and very clear on your objectives and your financials and all of your modeling. And then with that mindset to attract guests and maximize your bookings, I think you're ready to go to start to implement some of these strategies that we're going to be talking about today. But I think those are really the first two steps. You got to get your mind right, and you got to make sure that mind being right is both a mindset and an understanding of where you stand.
That's exactly right. And, personally, back in the days of COVID, we were all charging higher rates because the competition was lower and we could. Today, I wouldn't say rates are dropping. I think that's a bad way of thinking about it. Nightly rates aren't dropping. They're normalized. If you go back to where rates were pre-COVID, we're getting back into kind of normalcy, if you will. Yep. And now we have to learn to live within normalcy. But there are some things, when I think about my tactics, some things that I am doing currently. Tim, as you know, went out and got some new photographs, some new videos prepared. Want to make sure we're presenting the property the best possible way we can. And secondly, we talked about this with Nick from Proper Insurance. Hotels have safety engineers on site. So we're taking the home safety course through Breezeway. Shout out to Breezeway. We'll have a guest from Breezeway on the show in the future. But being able to apply that home safety standard seal to your listing, once again, gives the guest even more assurance that when they check in, they're going to have a great environment. So again, it's thinking about things that it's not what you can't do. It's what can you do to better position your home, to stand out from others, to set yourself apart, to drive the revenue that you want to drive. So many things we can do. That's just a couple, Tim.
Yeah, it goes back to maximizing or optimizing your revenue potential, and then also protecting the property as a whole for back-to-back or consecutive guest stays. And I've heard some people talking about, well, I'm looking at dynamic pricing, or I'm going to target, I'm going to revise my niche in the market that I'm going after, because what I'm finding is, that niche I had established was, at a different price point, at that high level price point that TC you had talked about, or what other what other things can I do to continue to amplify the guest experience when they're at the property? Because, your goal is stand out from the competition, really drive that revenue. We're always going to lead with that, we've got to drive revenue through these challenging times. It's not, when I think of defense, I think, well, contract expenses. Let's really control and pull back on those expenses. And man, we've talked about it quite a few times here, but I think that has such a horrible impact on your long-term revenue potential that I just can't stress it enough that this should not be your strategy as you're navigating this market.
I think that's exactly right. The adage of you can't cut your way to success. I think that's right. I think this is the time to think differently. As you know, Tim, when we first listed the property, we were charging a very high premium rate. We could. The house deserved it. Today, we have to think a little bit differently. It's a tactic. Our pricing tactics have changed a bit. We're still going to be a bit more premium than others out there. But I've rethought about the delta between those two things. And to some degree, there's a test and learn that we're always going to be going through. These market conditions are market conditions we haven't had to work with in the last 3 or 4 years. So there's a test and learn. I'm going to test a few things, see how they work, learn, test a few new things. And it's that ongoing process of test and learn, apply, test, learn, apply, that's going to help me fine tune my tactics for today's economic conditions. And, I think that's always, the best place or the best way to think about it. In 2 years, if the economy is booming, we're still going to be wanting to test and learn so that we can respond and tweak our tactics to that condition.
Yeah, because one of the tactics I've seen, that hasn't been explored by many that I talk to is, I rely on Airbnb and VRBO. And one day I'll get my direct booking website set up. My question is always, well, what other distribution channels are you looking at? And, a lot of times it is like, oh, I've heard of this one or I've heard of that one, but, I'm good on Airbnb and VRBO. And I think having that mindset to adapt and change to the market conditions and really focus on what are some new ways that I can expand to new distribution channels. I know, where your property is, there's quite a few. And that doesn't mean you're just going to dive into all of them. But I know that you're looking at other distribution channels and you're already active on quite a few. But I mean, just keeping abreast of what's going on in the market and what distribution channels are out there. And if any align with your objectives to the point that you want to jump in on those channels.
Yeah. And an easy one is leverage your past guests. If you've had some great guests, leverage them. I mean, reach out to them, send them the new photographs of the house, invite them back in. So, that's one of the best places to start is someone who's already stayed with you, enjoyed the home, expressed to you that they enjoyed the home, reach back out and offer them a discount for being a repeat guest. So, again, as you think about things that you can do today that you didn't necessarily do in the past, that's good because you're responding to changing market conditions. So if I go through the list of things that we have done in response to the changing economic conditions, first, we've had new photographs taken.
Yep.
Second, we've done some upgrades in the house. We've taken this opportunity to repaint, to refresh. Why do that? Well, we've talked about this on prior episodes. There's more competition than there's ever been because of the reopenings of hotels. So we have to make sure that we are competitive. I want to make sure that my paint is fresh and the house is looking great. Next, I've really reinforced, even though we've always had very, very high cleaning standards, we've gone back and seen what else can we do. And in addition to that, we talked about this in a prior episode, I'm going to eliminate the cleaning fee and make sure that my nightly rate allows me to capture what I need to capture on revenue so that I don't have to list that cleaning fee separately. We just installed some privacy screens in the pool area to once again enhance the guest experience. And I have leveraged our past guests several times to reach out to offer a stay at a discounted rate because they've been great guests. and I've had great success there. So these are just things that we have done. It's simply meant to be examples of think differently, modify your tactics to the changing economic conditions.
So let's go back to the cleaning fee, because I got to tell you, if I'm looking at an Airbnb property and I click on the property and I'm going to stay here for 4 or 5 nights, and the cleaning fee is zero, that's a different. I mean, that stands out to me. That sticks out to me as like, oh wow, look at that. Now, do I think, oh well, yeah, they just absorb that cost into their nightly rate? Of course, because this is what I do. But I do think that most of our travelers that we welcome to our properties and are selecting us over others, they'll look at that zero cleaning fee or that low cleaning fee compared to the competitors in the area and say, oh, wow, look at that. And then not only that, but if I'm advertising that we offer a clean space, and when I read the reviews, everyone's saying how clean the property is, now I've doubled down on this differentiator. So I'm seeing, wow, they don't charge a cleaning fee, and they have all these 5-star reviews talking about how pristine the property is. Yes, this is an easy yes. I'm not even going to look any further. I'm going with this one. So I do think there's real potential there with individuals being more strategic on how they present the additional cleaning fee on top of their property.
I think that's right. And as an owner, this may mean that instead of the 30 to 40% profit margin I enjoyed during COVID, maybe now it's 25 to 30%. Okay.
Right.
That's still better than you can get most anywhere else. And in my listing, I'm working on this right now. I'm going to talk about we don't charge an extra cleaning fee, nor do we charge a fee for heating our pool and spa. We expect you, our guest, to expect the house to be clean. You expect the pool to be heated. We're not going to charge you for what we now consider baseline expectations. Now, we are going to excel in both of those areas. We're going to make sure when you check in, that house is absolutely pristine. And the fact that you're not paying extra for it, that should be an advantage. I don't know that yet. This is a test and learn. But I think it's a worthy test and learn considering the economic conditions that we're facing today and the level of competition that we are experiencing today.
And the experienced Airbnb traveler is going to think to themselves when they see a zero cleaning fee, they're going to think to themselves, oh crap. This is one of those properties where I got to do all the laundry, I got to make all the beds, I got to mop the floors, I basically have to do the cleaning for me. So anticipate that, right? And this is where you're anticipating as you're building these strategies, how could my potential customers construe this? How could they look at this and say, this isn't a good deal? And so you've got to, in the description, I think I know Airbnb right now allows you to add your checkout instructions to the post so the person staying there can see what they need to do to check out. So if not only are you charging a $0 cleaning fee and you're clearly, a very clean property based on reviews, but then when I look at your checkout directions and it's like safe travels, have a safe trip, that's again just hitting home the value and the differentiation of your property over others.
Yeah, it's a good point. We have modified the requests that we make of the guest at checkout. And basically today we ask, hey, would you put all of your towels in a bathroom?
Yep.
Why? Because if they're wet, if they're damp, we don't want them mildewing somewhere. So just place them in a bathroom somewhere. Thank you very much. And then if there's any open food containers, please put those in a sealed trash bag, put them out for the trash to pick up, and then safe travels home. And why did I do that? Well, we did that because, again, I put myself in the shoes of when I check out of the hotel, I am not given a list of 30 items to do the night before I check out.
Yep.
So I'm putting myself in the shoes of the guest of what should I expect to do? It's reasonable to put my towels in a bathroom, and it's reasonable to remove open food containers. And outside of that, it's already stressful. I'm leaving vacation. Let's make it as easy as possible. And then we ask our cleaning team to do a great job for the turnover cleaning. I think that's fair. And I think in today's competitive environment, I think that's how we need to think about things. In addition to, and I'll always underscore this, man, this is the time to reinforce and double down on hospitality.
Right.
And if you don't like hospitality, sell your property. You're in the wrong business.
It is. I mean, this is, if you shudder at the thought of having to talk, if you think to yourself, it's so annoying that I got to send this welcome email, and I just can't stand that level of, and maybe going into it, I thought I'd love it, and it turns out I don't. I think that's it. That's, probably time to really get with a professional and start to plan your exit ahead of schedule a little bit here, because when you're thinking about, and we talk a lot about self-managing your property. A lot of short-term rental owners will leverage a property management company and essentially give away all of their profit, and then they go from a pretty robust profit model to a penny profit business overnight, and then they wonder why when they don't get bookings, all of a sudden they're drowning. And so I think understanding that the property management company, high likelihood they're not going to execute a high level of hospitality. And you and I have lived that before. When we share our war stories of, before we really got into this and we were just traveling and doing short-term rentals as guests, just the poor communication and how it was night and day when you had to talk to a property management company. I always think back to, I was telling you about the time I stayed at a property and all the batteries in all of the remotes were just corroded. Couldn't get anyone on the phone. The remotes weren't working. We had traveled all day, so we just wanted to relax before we went out on our adventure, and couldn't get anyone to respond. And then finally, when they did respond, just no engagement, kind of annoyed that they had to help us. And then some just pissed off dude showed up about an hour later with a pack of batteries and handed us the pack of batteries and left. And I was like, cool, this is a property management company that we're dealing with right now. That's definitely not going to win any service or hospitality awards anywhere. And yet when I went and checked out their property management company, they touted their customer service. 5-star customer service is what we provide. And it was just laughable and super aggravating now that I look back on it and go, people are spending, 20% of their revenue to 30% of their revenue, and they don't even realize that that's the level of service that's being delivered, which is why you've got to own it. You've got to self-manage your property and take pride in that communication.
And truly, if you don't enjoy working with people, it probably is the wrong line of business for you. I was talking to my CPA a couple days ago, and he owns short-term rentals up in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And he self-manages because, again, let's go back to, if you're having to reduce your rates a bit, now your profit margin's 25%, and your property management fee is 25%. Guess what? That means you get zero.
Yep.
So CPA...
Best case scenario.
Yeah. CPA manages his own property. And, he talks about 10 o'clock at night, I get a call from a guest. If you're sitting on the couch and you get that call from a guest and you're pissed, that is a clear sign you are in the wrong business, because what you should be thinking about is, oh my goodness, I've got a guest on vacation. Something's up. How can I help? And I'll give you an example. Just recently, we had a great guest a couple of months ago. I mean, just a terrific guest, and really enjoyed getting to know this guest and her family, and started reaching out to me a few days ago, and probably texting for a couple of hours. And she was wanting to plan her next stay in our house over Christmas. And she was excited about it, and she wanted to know what kind of decorations we can do and how we can set the house up for the kids. And the story here is, if you don't like doing that kind of thing, if you don't really like it, then you really have to rethink if this is the line of business you want to be in, because self-managing doesn't mean that you get to ignore everything. It gets to mean that you are making a conscious choice to engage in your business. And
right.
For those it's not fun, you shouldn't do it. For those that love it and enjoy talking to people, it's nothing better.
I completely understand that as you and I champion this, we've been doing this for combined a very long time, right? Like we obviously love this. There's nothing better than helping people, and you and I have talked at length about why we do this, and it's to help people kind of build wealth through short-term rentals. But I got to tell you, it's connects to where we are right now, because you mentioned it. It's building that post-stay relationship with your best guests, because you're not going to do that if you don't love the service. I mean, as soon as they check out, they're dead to you. Is oftentimes, if you don't love service, that's where you look at it. And I know you and I look at it and say, well, this is a guest for life now. This is someone where we want to continue to nurture the relationship. And not only do we want to encourage the repeat booking, not only do we want to keep the conversation post checkout going to say, hey, we can't wait to have you back at this house. We can't wait to, we're so proud to be able to host you and your family for the holiday. And we're so excited to welcome you back. But also, we would love to, help any of your friends and family that you have that are also looking to travel. We'd love to be their place to stay when they're in town. And you can build whole models around guest loyalty, and those things aren't hard. You find that raving fan, and you can offer them discounts on their stay if they provide referrals to you that book. I mean, that's the beauty of keeping these conversations going and being a small, essentially small business owner. Is that doesn't mean you have to offer that to everyone. That means you have to offer that to the guests that you want to offer it to, and then don't be scared and don't hesitate when it comes to reaching out to them and saying, hey, again, thanks so much. It was great to have you. We'd love to welcome you back. We'd love to offer you a discount if you were to book in the next period of time. And, we'd love to offer you another discount if there's anyone that you refer to our property, because it's true. It's those individuals that have a great experience at your property is your best marketing that you could ask for.
And you can never rest on your laurels. And you and I both kind of take this as a competition of, how can we make it better than the last time? So They enjoyed the house. They want to stay again. And our mindset is always, goodness, we've already set a standard. We've already set the bar pretty high. Mm-hmm. How can we set the bar even higher this next time to never rest on our laurel? And the last thing you want is for a guest to refer to another guest and that guest not to have an exceptional experience, because now you've disappointed two people. So it really is, there is this fire that you have to, let's set the bar high, and then let's set it higher and set it higher and set it higher. We've got a guest checking in July, and this is about their 5th time staying at the house. And there's many things that have changed since the last time they stayed. Once again, trying to plus up the environment. And if they're not really excited about the new things, I'll be disappointed. But I sure have tried hard. And that's kind of the message here, is always set the bar high.
And so in our background, we talk about +1. It's whatever that last great experience was, the next experience has to have at least a +1 to it. A +1 meaning just another level, another layer added. With short-term rentals, and TC, I'd love to get your perspective on this. With short-term rentals, when an owner is looking to +1 and they're thinking, okay, well, I want to offer additional services. It's important to note here that depending on where your property resides, there's something that they need to keep in mind about adding additional services, right? Because in some areas, doesn't that start to overlay into hotel experience, and doesn't that kind of create some issue for a short-term rental owner that they need to be mindful of?
Yep, got to be very cautious about the services provided, and always check in with your CPA to make sure you're complying with the guidelines associated with a short-term rental business. But what we do is, we talk to our guests during the stay and after the stay, and we ask for critical feedback. We don't necessarily say, tell us what you liked. We ask questions like, what's going to make your stay better next time? What can we add to the home to make your stay even more enjoyable? And a few things have come out of that. We had one guest say, hey, my wife and I love to have tea in the evening, and you didn't have a hot water pot. So we added that. And we're always asking for that kind of feedback. Most recently, we had a guest stay at the house and say, it'd be great if around the pool you had privacy screens because there's houses on each side, and it'd be great to feel a little bit more private out there. So we added privacy screens. So it's asking the questions, not to get the accolades, not to get the high fives. It's asking the questions, the critical questions that will help you improve the business. And to me, that's what's helped us the most, is asking the guest for critical feedback. Like the one that we've had now stay with us 3 times said, my family loves to sit on the couch at night, watch TV. And even if it's hot outside, we'd love to have a throw blanket on. So we've added 5 throw blankets to the house. It adds a bit more to the cleaning, but everybody now uses those throw blankets. So great recommendation, great suggestion. Always look for ways to just +1.
Well, and that goes back to, making those +1 decisions and really thinking through the full life cycle of how that decision impacts your full business. Because, okay, throw blankets are a great example, because if a guest says, hey, I'd love to have, some throw blankets, I really miss that, because, we use them. And then you're not thinking about that full life cycle of, well, are throw blankets going to be damaged over time? Where am I sourcing these blankets from? How many do I need how many am I going to put out? And do I want to have a back stock of those blankets? And how do I make sure that they're clean for guests between stays? So if you're like, just put 6 throw blankets, we'll just add 6 throw blankets or 1 throw blanket to the house, and then I don't think about it ever again. The first time a guest puts a throw blanket on and it is anything less than fresh and clean, you've now negatively impacted that guest stay. So adding those little touches, really think through. And my challenge for all of our listeners is, you have a business model, you have goals and objectives, and anything you add to the property, you've got to run it through your full, make sure it aligns with your goals and objectives, and make sure it works for your entire business, from guest check-in to guest checkout, and then cleaning and reset of the property. And so, you mentioned, TC, the privacy screens. Those made a lot of sense, right? Because that aligned with your objectives as a property. So as soon as that guest brought that up, it was an easy decision, but you didn't just make it haphazardly. You jumped in and said, okay, I've got the capital reserves because my pro forma is built to put this much aside. I've got 3 quotes. Here's the quote I'm going to go with. Are they, for you in Florida, are they hurricane rated? Wouldn't that be horrible to say, oh, my guest wants privacy screens, let's go ahead and throw them up. And the first storm that comes through, all of your screens are ripped off because it's a solid material that catches the wind. So you ran through all of that and said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense because it amplifies the experience of the guest stay. It creates a beautiful private experience, because that, the property I know that you're talking about, backs up to a beautiful, peaceful green space that when the breeze, you hear the trees and the breeze, and it's amazing. But that's the piece where you really got to run it through that full life cycle of the experience of your property and how it's going to impact you short term and long term.
That's exactly right. And you said it. We used the reserve that we set aside, and we talked about on our podcast that we talked about performance. We used the funds in the reserve to fund the privacy screens.
Yep.
And we went through all the due diligence you noted. And going back to the throw blankets, it's a great point, because we made sure that when we bought the throw blankets, they were throw blankets that could be run through the wash. That was key. You don't want to have to dry clean those things. So buy material, buy throws that could be washed. Number 2 is I had to reach out to the cleaning company and say, be aware, we now have 5, 6 throws. They're in a basket in the family room. We need to add that to the laundry list. And then we added it to our checklist so that during the cleaning process, it was added to the checklist so the cleaners were reminded to clean. And then the inspections that we do both pre and post, they're looking at the cleanliness of those throws. So you're exactly right. There's a process. For those listeners, don't think of this as a complication. Think of this as This is what an owner of a business has to do to secure the long-term viability of your business, but also the relationship with your customers, your guests.
And it is nonstop. I mean, before I hit record on today's episode, you and I were talking about the wall outlets. And, of course, safety is always top of mind, and we're getting ready on a couple different fronts to, provide some resources for guests around safety. But before I hit record, you and I are sitting here talking about, how does replacing the X number of night lights you have installed all around the same property that we're talking about the privacy screens on, but, installing outlets that have the strip of light underneath the outlet. And so if you go in and you install those with every outlet, you actually very nicely create a well-lit environment for guests at night, because we're thinking about, okay, a guest gets in late, it's still a new property to them, they're going to bed, lights are off, someone needs to get up and use the restroom in the middle of the night, they're groggy from travel, and they're not used to where the furniture is, they're not used to where everything is. We don't want to create it unsafe. We never want to create an unsafe environment for anyone. That's our job one. And so, how does making that addition improvement to the property help our guest experience? And I think we came away with, it's fairly positive. So now we've got to figure out, what is that expense? What does it entail? Can we install these ourselves? And then for you and I, we're like, well, can we create some content for our listeners so that we can go through all of these types of owner-led installs, so that they're not, spending unnecessarily on fixes that they could easily do themselves during one of their trips out to the property. So a little sneak peek to things we're working on. But this is a constant conversation, and it's either a conversation or it's an internal dialogue, but just constantly thinking about, how can I improve this guest relationship? That doesn't change with challenging economic times or great economic times. But what it does is it ensures that you're continuously improving the space for the guest, and really making it so that you're maximizing your revenue potential, because you're always improving the guest experience.
Yep. And I think, Tim, we have waxed on and waxed on about this. I think we have, kind of exhausted this topic. Is it time for a recap?
I think it's time for a recap, because while we might have exhausted it, I think I could continue to talk about it for another hour, but we will not, because I would like to keep our faithful listeners and subscribers and not scare them away, because we do like to really talk about customer service. I think we could do a whole season on customer service, but let's go ahead and recap for our listeners.
Yeah, and we may have to tag team this recap, but I would start with, remember, we talked about this prior episodes, always have in clear view your objectives, your strategies, and tactics. That's number one.
Yep.
Number two, realize that it's the tactics that change to respond to changing economic conditions. Number three, economic conditions, embrace your reality. Don't run from them. Embrace your reality, get your mindset right, and now start looking at those tactics that you can deploy against the economic conditions, your reality that you're in today. We listed a number of them. You'll have your own. We're not going to go back through them again, but the idea is, come up with those tactics that you can do today to respond to and meet the current economic conditions. Remember, if this economic condition is new to you, do some test and learn. Test some things, see how they work, learn, test some more. The objective is to modify your tactics in an informed way because of the economic conditions. Next, always look for ways to +1 your property. And then finally, core to this entire business, foundational, fundamental, core, hospitality, hospitality, hospitality. Take great care of your guests, value them as what they mean to your business. They are your business. And then finally, if you didn't already know, in these changing economic conditions, when rents are challenged, self-manage. If you're making 25% profit margin and you give that all away to your property manager, you're making zero. No better time than today than to develop both the confidence and the competence to self-manage, to do it with pride, and to do it with hospitality in your heart.
Nailed it as usual, TC. Nothing to add. I think that's a great summary and a great way to end today's episode. So, as always, first and foremost, thank you to CleaningBnB, our sponsor, CleaningBnB.com. Reach out to them, schedule a call, and let's see how they can help maximize the cleanliness of your property. And as we mentioned, maximize your revenue. Thank you, as always, to everyone for tuning in. Remember to tell your friends to subscribe to Vacation Rental Blueprint for more valuable insights, actionable tips. And until next time, great hosting. Take care.